To you live right now from Washington, D.C. And actually just a little west of here in the nation's capital, there's a hearing going on that is very consequential potentially for American national security interests. It is the Senate Appropriations Committee, I believe it is, and Secretary of State Blinken and Secretary of Defense Austin are testifying right now. And many things are happening right now because the primary purpose of this is the president's request for $106 billion of your dollars to go to Israel, Ukraine, Taiwan, and a handful of other things. But those are the headliners there. And look, some of the things that are being said there, you're probably going to see some sound bites of this on the major news media as the day goes on. They'll probably put a sound bite of this or that. And there's been some fireworks that happened at the beginning, which I'm going to show you just a second, that hasn't been seen in quite a while in America. So that's going to be newsworthy by itself. But when you see these sound bites from some of these leaders later on today, there's probably not going to be a lot of explanation underneath it. And you need a deeper dive to understand what the reality is underneath what these guys are saying, because they're definitely not going to tell you. And frankly, a lot of people on television today don't know to ask the right questions. We do. We're going to help you do that. So first of all, let me show you a little bit of some of the fireworks that happened in the beginning. Secretary Blinken was testifying and had started made his opening statement, and he refers to some of the people in the room, and he says this.
I also hear very much the passions expressed in this room and outside this room. All of us are committed to the protection of civilian life. All of us know the suffering that is taking place as we speak. All of us are determined to see it end. But all of us know the imperative of standing up with our allies and partners when their security, when their democracies are threatened. That's what's happening now. We stand resolutely with them, even as we stand resolutely for the protection of innocent civilians.
Okay, so when he says some of the people in this room, what he's referring to, I'm going to show you in just a second, but it is basically a view in America that has been demonized, frankly. And we're going to do a deep dive on this subsequently, possibly later in this week. But we are a country of free speech. But there is a certain viewpoint right now that is being outright demonized and not even given a chance to have a hearing. And first, I'm going to show you exactly what happened, and I'll tell you what that means.
Crisis of global hunger in its wake. And in the Indo-Pacific,
Gary, if you can show the protesters.
Growing threats and aggression, particularly from the Chinese government.
We're standing up for our interests and values, not shrinking back.
Okay, we
not
don't seem to have that
aggression
handy.
Against Ukraine.
Well, what happened?
Not in the face of an intensifying strategic competition in the Indo-Pacific and around the world.
If the witness will suspend, and I ask that everyone again respect this hearing, we will suspend until the room is cleared.
Okay, yeah, there was some other stuff. There's a bunch of red hands that were put up that they were claiming that we have blood on our hands because of what's happening to the Palestinian civilians in the Gaza Strip. Now, everybody in the United States is nearly universally in agreement that because of the heinous, barbaric attacks by Hamas on October 7th against the Israeli civilians, especially, that the Israeli government is absolutely within its rights to go and seek retribution against the people who perpetrated this horrific crime. And I'm in complete agreement with that. That what was done by the Hamas terrorist has no justification. No matter what else happened, that is unjustifiable. But there is a big issue, and there's two separate issues. One is a moral issue, and then one is, frankly, a national security issue and a practical issue for the United States. And they're intertwined, and they won't come apart. And I'm going to explain to you here why that's important, how we respond to this. And it's not just this easy reflexive thing, which most in the United States, or many anyway, in the U.S. are saying is that, yeah, that Israel can go in and do whatever it wants in the Gaza Strip. And if there's people killed, then that's unfortunate. But, you know, that's just how it goes sometimes. Now, one of the other things that was said in here, actually, you know, at the end of that segment right there, you heard that protesters say, ceasefire now, because they want the bloodshed to stop. Well, yesterday, the prime minister of Israel had this to say.
Just as the United States would not agree to a ceasefire after the bombing of Pearl Harbor or after the terrorist attack of 9/11, Israel will not agree to a cessation of hostilities with Hamas after the horrific attacks of October 7th.
So he's point blank saying there's not going to be a ceasefire. And of course, the reason why so many are asking for a ceasefire around the world, not just in the Senate chamber, is because there are thousands upon thousands of innocent Palestinian people who are being killed in the bombardment that Israel is leveling, trying to go after Hamas. So a very valid question is, to what extent should the United States continue to support Israel without any kind of requirements or guardrails in our equipment, because many in the region don't differentiate between whether we're actually pulling triggers or not, or whether we're actually helping, or whether we're even trying to restrain Israel. If we're helping them, then we're seen as being one and the same to them. And I'll tell you why that's important in a minute. But there was an exchange by Kirby in the White House where this issue was raised, and the question was asked like this.
Does the United States support the goal of destroying Hamas?
We support what Israel is trying to do to protect their citizens from the threat of Hamas. And James, I think you know this, we aren't on the ground fighting in this war. There's no intent to do that. These are Israeli military operations. They get to decide what their aims and strategy are. They get to decide what their tactics are. They get to decide how they're going to go after Hamas. We're doing everything we can to support them, including providing our perspectives, including asking them hard questions about their aims and their strategy, and the kind of questions we'd ask ourselves. But the question you asked me is a question better put to the Israeli Defense Forces.
No, Mr. Kirby, that's not right. Because we can't just hand over anything that Israel's asking for and then allow them to use it however they want, and then say, well, I mean, we're not pulling the trigger. Ergo, if they do something that's a violation of the laws of land warfare, or a violation of the international based, laws and order that we uphold, then we can just say, hey, we didn't pull the trigger. We're good to go. It doesn't matter what we say. It only matters what happens. And it also matters what people of the region think. Now, on our previous deep dive, we showed you some of what was happening in Turkey last weekend, where there was a crowd of over 1 million that were gathered in vicious support for Hamas, not even just the Palestinian people, but for Hamas, because they viewed them as freedom fighters, and they viewed what Israel was doing as war criminals. Now, you can disagree, and most in America do. Again, that doesn't matter what we think. It matters what people in the region think. And I'll tell you why it matters what people in the region think. Because we have troops on the ground in Iraq and in Syria. We've also talked about them. That is why there is a big risk that this could actually escalate. So if people in the region get really angry about what's happening in the Gaza Strip to the Palestinian people, and then they conflate that with us and they say, hey, you're supporting them, you're giving them the ammunition and the missiles, the artillery shells that are falling in Gaza, so you're one and the same. And then if they look to our troops in Iraq and in Syria, then we find out, as Mr. Austin said here, here's what we're doing in terms of that.
Our personnel have come under repeated attack in recent days by Iranian-backed militia groups, and these attacks must stop. At the President's direction, U.S. forces have conducted precision self-defense strikes on facilities in eastern Syria used by Iran's IRGC and its affiliates. If Iranian-backed groups continue to attack U.S. forces, we will not hesitate to take further necessary measures to protect our people. We've also raised force protection measures across the region, and I have deployed a terminal high-altitude area defense battery, as well as additional Patriot batteries.
Now, as I've talked about many times here on Deep Dive, as well as many network channels that I've been on recently, our troops shouldn't even be there. We should have gotten them out years ago, but we didn't. We have what we have now. Now, to explain to you why that's important and why that's a big risk to us, you don't have to look any further than our own spokesman, Jake Sullivan, who said this just a couple of days ago.
We're taking every measure necessary to protect our forces, to increase our vigilance, and to work with other countries in the region to try to keep this conflict that is currently in Israel and Gaza from spinning out into a regional conflict. But the risk is real, and therefore our vigilance is high.
Great. I'm glad that he recognizes the risk is real, But look, that has to temper our actions. So we have to be very careful, even in what we say. So we can't go on this national or actually globally broadcast statements coming out of the Senate here and saying, hey, we're just going to do whatever Israel wants, or with our key spokesman saying, hey, they can do whatever they want to do. And if Netanyahu doesn't want a ceasefire, then there's no ceasefire and we'll keep going, even if that means the civilians in Gaza keep dying by the hundreds every day. Now, that is a big issue on a moral ground. We can argue that on the moral grounds that we should not be saying, hey, Israel, just do whatever you want to Hamas. And if 100 people, 200, 400 people die in a day, that's unfortunate, but that's just the cost of doing business. Because I'm telling you, from a military perspective, there are a lot of things that Israel could do that would make their job a lot more difficult, that would make it take a lot longer, but would protect more civilians and reduce that number significantly of how many people are being innocently killed. We can talk about that another time. What we're talking about here now, is the implications for the United States of possibly getting sucked into another war. Now, you just saw there that Secretary Austin said just moments ago that we're sending more assets in there, air defense capacity, things to protect those troops on the ground. Now, obviously, I'm an advocate that we should get them out there. We should have already had them out so that they wouldn't be a point of vulnerability, but they're there now. So the question is going to be, what do we do? Well, we didn't have time to pull this clip out, but a few minutes before we went live on air here, Senator Graham actually was grilling both Secretary Blinken and Secretary Austin. And basically, well, not basically, he expressly said, if an American is killed in either Iraq or Syria, that should be a red line. We're going after Iran. Okay. I wish that Lindsey Graham would think beyond the end of his sentence, because he doesn't, and too few other people are either. We are still kind of locked in this situation where we think that we can literally do whatever we want and there's no consequences. We fired missiles, I don't know how many times, into Syria, alleged for chemical weapons or for whatever reason. We took out, Biden previously took out airfields in Syria. We conduct these kinds of operations a lot in different countries. We're operating in Syria, for example, without the permission of their government. And what is Syria going to do about it? We kind of have this mentality that we can do whatever we want. So it's pretty clear that Senator Graham thinks that we can just lob a few missiles into Tehran and they'll get the message, and that'll be that. Only that the chances of that are very low, because the whole region is already a flaming tinderbox that is just below the surface. You can see it, you can feel it, almost taste it, that the place is ready to explode. And the chances that Iran just backs down if they should get hit, whether they gave the order or not, if an American gets killed, if they gave the order or not, and we strike them, I think the chances of them just doing nothing is almost zero in this current environment, which means they will probably retaliate in some way. And I know that the hardliners in Iran will definitely ask for that to happen. And then they'll strike another American target, maybe this time not a military target, perhaps a diplomatic target somewhere. We've got them all over the Middle East that are not protected as well as those troops out there. What are we going to do then? You see where this could lead. You just start here, the escalation ladder goes up, and then we're already a situation where if we don't do anything in response to these attacks that have come so far on our troops in Iraq and Syria, then we're seen as backing down, right? And so we didn't. We fired some missiles and blew up some buildings. Now, if another one comes in, if Lindsey Graham is right and Americans do get killed, and I have a great fear of that, and that makes me angry that we're just leaving them sitting there waiting to see if anybody dies. As we're making this video today, all of our troops there are alive. If we got them out today, no one would die. But if that doesn't happen, and if we don't do that, and then our troops do perish, now then what Lindsey Graham said will be on many people's minds. And that could then start a whole series of escalations. And who knows even what Turkey would do, because Turkey's already really angry about this. People in Egypt are angry, Lebanon, UAE, Saudi Arabia. There's lots of anger among the Arab world. And the more they see these Palestinian people killed, and the more they see us not care. And again, it doesn't matter. Both Austin and Blinken both said the right words. They said, we care about the civilians. We care about Palestinians. Some of the senators said, we're going to send some aid. Those words don't even matter. What matters is what happens. And if they see us saying, you got a green light to do whatever you want, Israel, no matter how many civilians are killed. And they just say they're, precision guided munitions, when all of these images we see graphically show they're not precision guided munitions. They're wiping out entire city blocks in many cases. And that's what the Arab world sees. Now, we can say it's justified. We can say Israel was attacked mercilessly, and so they deserve to respond mercilessly. But that doesn't extend to the civilian population in there. Now, I'm telling you that the people throughout the Middle East don't see it the way that we see it. And before we point a finger at them and say they're wrong, we have to understand the reality of the world. Our objective needs to be to keep this thing, keep the lid on it, keep it from exploding so that Israel's safety is assured, and so that we don't get into an additional war, and that we at least try to calm down the anger of our Arab friends throughout the Middle East. And there's plenty of them. And even some of our best friends and allies in the region are really getting angry about this. We dare not get to the point to where they actually turn against us. And if you think that can't happen, then I'm afraid I'm going to have to give you some bad news. It can. We can squander the power that we have. We can squander our international reputation, our ability to influence both friends and adversaries if we're unwise about what we do. The things that we do, not just say, in the coming days and weeks could go a long way to determining whether we get sucked into a war that we can't win, that could cost us immeasurably for decades to come, or whether we start acting a little bit wiser and putting the brakes on some of the excesses that's going on in Israel. And look, we're not asking to stop. Let's be very clear. No one's saying they should not go after Hamas, but we should be saying, if you're going to use all of our equipment and all of our ammunition and all this funds, that there are some strings attached. There's nothing anti-Semitic about that. There should be strings attached that because our name is on this, you have to be more careful in what you do, and you have to get those American and all these other foreign citizens trapped in the Gaza Strip, get them out, get much more aid coming in, and be much more selective and genuinely targeted in how you go after Hamas. There needs to be some changes on the ground, and everybody needs to understand that. That's how we can keep this from blowing up. It remains to be seen what does happen, and we're going to continue to watch this ongoing hearing here to see if anything else comes up, and we'll report that later in the day. But in the meantime, I want to make sure that you have the deep dive and you understand when these people say these words, what's underneath it, because that's where the truth lies. And of course, truth lies in power is in information, and you now have it. Thanks. We'll see you on the next deep dive.